Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Murray. I'm with Mercy Corps and managing the ELAN. And we are very happy to welcome you today to our webinar, which will be talking about a catalog for cash transfer technology. And we kind of cheekily noted, will cash transfer catalog for technology save the world or solve all of our problems? And of course, we don't really expect it to, but we are interested in knowing if this idea and this tool would be of use to your various organizations. So this is not going to be a full kind of presentation webinar. This is really a chance for us to hear from you and to have some back and forth debate and discussion. So I'm going to take a few minutes now to make sure everybody is comfortable and able to use the platform. A few key features of the platform that you should be familiar with. Everybody has a little bubble with their name in it. To the bottom right, which is circled in a yellow circle on this slide, you'll see an icon with a microphone. You can tap on that icon and you'll be able to speak, which will unmute your microphone, or you can keep it muted while you're not speaking, which would be great because it will cut down on background noise for us. We're a pretty small group today, so if you want to take a minute and grab the mic and introduce yourself, you are very welcome to do so now.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Hi, Vincent.
Yeah, hi, this is Vincent. I'm Communication and Information Management Officer with the Cash Learning Partnership based in Oxford.
Great, thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beverly Sarah. I'm with eBree based in London.
Hi, everyone. Hamilton McNutt with NetHope based in DC.
And hi, it's Scott DiPortoro with UNHCR in Geneva.
Hi, this is Marcella Willis. I also work with NetHope on the Payment Innovations Project based in DC.
Hello, this is Rico from Food for Peace DC.
Claire Durham from Federation in Geneva.
This is Lily Fry. I work with Sarah on the ELAN. I'm Lily Fry 2, and she is Lily Fry 1.
Hi all, I'm Michael from Nigeria.
Great. I think we've covered most of the people on the line now. If there are additional folks that would like to introduce themselves, you can feel free to use the group chat box, which you'll need to click a little icon that's circled in red on this slide, which will allow you to speak with the whole group. Otherwise, it will just be Lily and myself that get your chats. So feel free to play around with that and let us know. If you've already introduced yourselves, can you let us know in your organization, how is it that you procure or how do you shop for e-transfer services? And if you're not speaking or if you don't have a comment to share, if you could keep your microphones muted, it would be great for us to ensure that we cut down on background noise.
Hi, Sarah. This is Hamilton. So NetHope is a member organization, so we don't necessarily procure for our own good, but we do provide resources to NGO members on how to procure for digital payment products, specifically bulk payment products.
Great. Okay. I think there may be one or two people that are having a little bit of trouble getting through to the group chat, but we can use the microphone for those who are having those difficulties. Just a quick reminder of who's sponsoring and supporting this work. We are a network, the ELAN network, which is guided by an advisory group that includes CALP, IRC, MasterCard, Mercy Corps, NRC, and Oxfam. The ELAN is supported by MasterCard, and we're putting this project under our e-voucher workstream, and wanted to take a second to thank specific organizations that have been helping us think about and draft the initial concept note behind this catalog. Oxfam, Amy O'Donnell at Oxfam has been a big proponent of this and was supposed to be helping us today, but unfortunately had a conflict, so she won't be able to be here, but she's put a lot of effort into getting this conversation to the point it's at the moment. Jimena from ACF Spain has been very helpful and a driver behind this, as has Mark from NRC. So this is going to be our discussion hour. This is an opportunity for us to hear from you and for you to help us shape this product to be maximally useful for organizations that are trying to figure out the maze of technology products that are available. So I'll give a quick, no more than 10-minute introduction to kind of where this conversation is at the moment. And then we have 4 structured questions that we'd love to get your feedback on about the principles behind this catalog, and then a few final questions about the logistics. So again, we have the chat box at our disposal, and we have an open microphone. So feel free to chime in at any moment. And I'm just going to pause now and make sure everyone's comfortable with the technology before we dive into the content. Are there any questions, or are there any troubles with any of the mechanisms?
I'm just not sure if my text is going into the group chat.
No, Beverly, we received it to presenters, and a couple of you have said that you can't actually send to the group chat. So please feel free to use the microphone to share your input. Okay,
because my screen says chat to presenters, but the top actually says group. So I was a little bit confused. Okay.
Okay, it's good if you can see the group chat so that you can see if there's other things coming by, but if you can't send to it, don't worry, just use your microphone.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, we've gone through these intros already, so it's great to know there's a good representation of donors and private sector and implementing humanitarian agencies here. So thank you everyone for joining. And I just was going on Google image search today, looking at some vintage technology catalogs, which was a lot of fun. And it's just a reminder to us that one of the key challenges behind this concept is the fact that everything changes so quickly, and how do we create a resource that is really going to be up to date and relevant, particularly in the places we work where all the elements, the infrastructure and the products are really evolving pretty rapidly. So we don't want a catalog that is designed just to fit our Atari and VHS cassette tapes. So the purpose that we've defined behind this catalog is that we want to make it as easy as possible for humanitarians to identify and use the best technology to support cash transfer programming. So we want to be able to share what's available in an accessible way to those frontline field workers who have the most influence and decision-making power over what they're using in the field. The approach that we've discussed to date would be that we compile this information on the main product features, the prices, their deployment history, meaning where they've been used by what organizations and what types of contexts, and how to get in touch with those supplier points of contact or with the people who are selling that product. We don't see this in any way as a way to replace standard procurement and vetting processes. We know that would still need to happen, but we see this more as a way to bridge that gap of how our humanitarian organizations know about what's out there, so that those procurement and vetting processes are actually happening with the best possible suppliers. We think it's important for this concept to focus only on technology that supports cash and voucher programming, because if we don't draw a limit somewhere, this could just become, I think, too expansive of a project, and I think there's plenty for us to focus on within those confines for the moment. The audience that we have narrowed this down to is really looking at international and local NGOs. Our feeling and our observations have been that UN agencies are often having their own corporate solutions or having more defined procurement policies, and maybe have less need for this type of product and less flexibility perhaps to test and adopt private and emerging technology solutions. But we do think that if some of the UN created solutions, for example, WFP scope, were of interest, they could, and if they become commercially available, it's something that could be included here. So the first kind of main project that we had in coming up with the scope for this catalog was defining product categories. Amy O'Donnell led an event in London recently with the Bond NGO ICT4D group, and she managed to pare this down into three main categories: beneficiary information management. Oops, sorry, there's something happening with the slide there. Oops. Beneficiary information management, e-vouchers, and e-cash. There was a discussion on, and originally we had talked about including M&E tools as sort of something that we thought would make sense to be included in this catalog. But after looking at the plethora of tools that exist and the fact that this is often kind of a different programmatic team that's focusing on monitoring and evaluation, we decided it would be okay to leave that out for now and to use as our main selection criteria for technology is this question: can this particular technology product help me more efficiently send e-transfers to beneficiaries? So that helped us land on these three categories. I'm just going to leave this slide up for a second and pause to see if there are any questions.
Hi, this is Rico from Food for Peace. I actually have a question. You had mentioned that it's primarily focusing on the cash and vouchers, and I'm just wondering, with this beneficiary information management piece, it seems like there could be a natural link to in-kind if agencies chose to apply it that way. Would that be a true assumption or not?
Ruka, yeah, I think that would be true. I mean, I think though that category in particular of product would be applicable for in-kind distributions. But we'd be also curious and interested in specifically looking at to what extent does that product facilitate payment, creating payment requests or creating payment demands that can be used for e-transfers.
Hi,
Okay.
this is Marcella. I have one more question here as well. So when you're talking about e-cash, there are so many differences between like closed loop systems where the service provider provides everything that you need to do cash transfers, whether it's through e-voucher or like mobile payments, et cetera. But then there's that whole other realm of working with private sector service providers in a market like mobile network operators and banks. So are you looking to include all of that, or are you really looking at closed loop service providers, for example, like a Red Rose?
Marcel, that's a great question, and something that we have specifically highlighted as a point of discussion a little bit later. I think the short answer for now is that for us, eCash is really defined as those open loop systems that can be converted or either used as cash, as a substitute for cash, or converted into cash. So we would put the e-voucher solution idea more, or the Red Rose solution idea more under the e-voucher category. But we are also struggling with the idea of how to sort through so many e-cash options that are out there.
Can I just comment here? It's Beverly from Ebury. We're actually very familiar with Red Rose and have met with them a few times recently, trying to explore how we can actually look at linking our open loop with their closed loop to produce something that's more seamless across the board. So, I mean, there is pieces that we're doing of how we can link those two worlds together.
Great. Yes, of course, this is going to get increasingly complicated as we try to draw categories on products that are constantly shape-shifting. So I'm going to go ahead and advance the slides for now and try to move towards our discussion questions. So before we do that, we've outlined these 4 principles for the catalog that I want to give everybody a chance to read. We're going to then go through all 4 of these with specific questions about the principles and dig into these in more depth. But I wanted to make sure everyone had a kind of overview of this big picture before we get into details on each specific principle. So I'll just mute my line for a second and let everybody read through these. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move along to the first point of debate and discussion, which is this point about the fact that there's been a big expression of interest in us being able to articulate which products have really been tested in the field and which of those are new solutions. I've heard from practitioners that, nobody wants to be a guinea pig, and everybody wants a solution that's tested. But at the same time, we don't want to limit the field and be stuck with the same products. So if we're going to put together a catalog and be presenting these products, what would be fair and transparent and reliable criteria to demonstrate the ability to which products are field tested?
Hi, it's Claire from the IFRC. I think this point links quite strongly with point 3, which is about products being rated. And it's certainly something from the good side we've tried to do before, where some agencies have their own catalogue, including us. And when we've tried to have a joint catalogue, that becomes quite contentious. And so it depends on what you want to have on there in terms of it being field tested new solutions, whether you want to say just who's used it, in which case you can have an offline discussion about how good something is. But I think those two are quite strongly linked, number 1 and number 3.
We've also, I think some of you are having a little trouble seeing the slides, so I want to read number 4 of the catalog principles for those of you who may not be able to see it. The 4th catalog principle reads, the catalog will not include local eCache technologies. These are too numerous and change too quickly to be included successfully in a global product catalog. We will include eCache products that are available in multiple countries. Sorry, we're still fiddling with the platform and we'll try and make this visible, but please keep highlighting if you're having trouble hearing or seeing.
Hi. You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. I think that's
okay.
Jimena.
Sorry. Hi, Jimena from ACF. Yes, as I mentioned before, between field tested about products, it's about differentiating also about functionalities, because there's a moment that the service provider market will be full with a tested solution and products, but there are a lot of functionalities that haven't been tested. So I think that in one moment when we start disaggregating between categories, I would suggest to clarify if this functionality that is within the category is field tested or not. Because yes, there are a lot of new solution that has been tested, but a lot within that solution that a lot of functionalities that haven't.
Okay, we can move on to the next point of discussion. We can always come back to this. I think it is, as Claire mentioned, very related to the third principle. So we will go ahead and move on to the second principle and possible debate questions there. This is about who inputs information and how do we ensure that information's reliability when it's included in a catalog. I think our thinking from this was that it would be just a lot of work, really burdensome for any institution or individual to be responsible for updating the information, and that's something that the technology providers themselves could probably do. But then how do we ensure that that information is accurate and correct? What type of vetting is possible? And Claire, maybe it'd be interesting to hear how you've done this on the good side, and just a little unsure of how we could operationalize that process.
Yeah, I think it just becomes very problematic in terms of nobody wants to see their product up there as being, well, if it's good, that's fine. But if you're saying, oh, it doesn't actually have this functionality, or it's limited in this way, or actually this didn't work at all, that's where it becomes really difficult. And so what we actually ended up doing was just listing users or people who had bought from that product from that supplier. And then it was an offline chat to say, how was it? How did it work? And you couldn't really have anything that was detailed on there, but you at least knew who to talk to.
Great, thanks, Claire.
Hi, this is Marcella. Because I just wanted to make the point of also, sometimes the products are out there and they only get better by trial and error. And so if you have a service provider and you have a product up there, I think sometimes when they're new, they are going to have more challenges. But then how as an industry are you going to get to a point where they do get better? So I think there is something about having new products up there and being able to continue to field test them, because then they improve on their functionality. So I like that idea of having the ability for users or case studies where it's been tried so that people can then follow up and see how that's gone. And maybe there would be a way that the technology provider can say something about how, if they wanted to provide some sort of timelines or some kind of information to show that they've used it in X, Y, and Z instances, and based on that, they've actually made changes to the products and services. So perhaps it's requiring them to speak to that somehow, to say how they've made changes based on those trials. So just trying to see how that might be incorporated.
Thanks, Marcel. Yeah, I hear a tension because on the one hand, I completely understand Claire's perspective where you can't really have qualitative judgments of products, and I could see that becoming very problematic. But on the same time, I know Jimena has brought up the idea before of, how great would it be if we could have a sort of TripAdvisor for e-transfer technology, where, if you really loved a product, you could give it 5 stars, and if you really detested it, you could give it 1 star, just like the Cockroachy Motel. And I'm wondering, it seems like those two things probably can't or shouldn't maybe be in the same place, but is there room eventually for those things to exist in separate places?
I think it might depend on how public it is, because nobody is going to want to see their product up there with 1 star. I do appreciate that they might look to be able to improve on that, but I think it's how public that becomes. And I don't know if you have spoken with any providers, so like Red Rose or MasterCard or those who have said whether they would be up for that kind of approach to have their product rated like that.
I also think it might be a question of how many people are using the catalog and giving ratings. So it might be something to do in a phased approach where you do keep it less public, and then as more users come on board and start rating, it might become more public facing.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. Yep.
I think for us as a provider, sorry, there's a little bit of delay there. I think for us as a provider, we would probably be quite happy to look at being openly rated, because when we're working with large NGOs, what we're doing is not just pushing something that's off the shelf. It's something that we're bolting together, very, very tailored to their individual needs. So in theory, what they are delivered should be suiting their needs, not us just pushing a solution to try to make it fit. So from our perspective, I think we would welcome a very open rating system, but it's very hard as the provider to engage in how you are talking about your product without just constantly trying to sell it when you have a really great solution. And for us, quite often that is pairing with NGOs and partners that are already using, that are happy to share their stories. So that's why we particularly like that kind of rating system.
Interesting. Final question on this topic. What would you recommend for us if we find out, kind of levels of satisfaction is one thing, but I think kind of gross negligence or just majorly problematic deployments are perhaps a different category. And Claire, I'm sorry to pick on you, but I'm wondering, has that ever been an issue with the in-kind or goods catalog? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
No, absolutely. We had definitely had issues, over quality of products or, extremely late delivery or this kind of thing. And we know that suppliers potentially could sue us if we start to put that up, because it's obviously detrimental to their business. So on that side, that was problematic. And that's where we had to do the offline stuff. That was just too contentious to put up in any kind of, even not a public forum, even if it was going to be a sort of interagency forum. It does leave you open to potentially litigation. So we have to be really careful, I think.
Claire, in those situations, did you have the option, or was the catalog formatted in sort of a open to all format, or did you have any role in vetting who was included or not?
It was, I'm trying to think how we did it. So the catalogue that we have online is open to all, but it doesn't have suppliers. And then we have our own internal sort of list of suppliers, which of course most agencies all use the same one for blankets and tents and stuff. So this was going to be just an Excel spreadsheet with so each agency was going to put forward suppliers that they'd used. And I think actually we were just going to list all of them, and then people were going to put statements against them. And then we realized that just wasn't going to work. So it was listed with suppliers and users, and it was just as, it was very low tech.
Interesting. I'm going to move on to the third principle, which I think we've pretty much covered already, which is this idea of references. And I think there's been a lot of good points around volume, around potential litigation risks, around just understanding when that is going to be helpful, that it might be something that we would need to think about introducing in a staged way. But I guess one more question we haven't covered yet there was, if we were to have these products listed, or service providers, technology partners listed with places they've deployed in organizations, would the humanitarians that are here today be willing to serve as references? Would you be willing to share your personal or organizational information to be called upon for that offline discussion about how the deployment actually went?
This is Claire again. I think possibly. I guess it would depend on the contracts and how we set that up, and if we wanted to declare that we had worked with particular people in particular places. But I think it's possible that we would want to or could do that.
We've been thinking through the process of if it's the private sector partner who enters and populates information about their suite of services, should we be instructing them that we would envision that the kind of deployment history would be something they fill in as well. Is that something that would anyone find it problematic if they listed the deployments, including organization names, and then left it to the potential new consumers to find the exact contacts at those within the NGOs? Would that be a potential model, or do you see problems with that? And I recognize we may be getting a little bit too far into the weeds. So
just to add, I think it has to be really concrete information about who has geographically and where it was tested. My fear is that, based on my experience, it's a bit overburdened, because everybody that wants to work with a new product, you start having a lot of calls and a lot of reference. So at the beginning, it's really good, but it could really overburden the person who might be the reference. And so for me, it's about of having a balance between great to be in that catalog and not overburden the procurement team or the person who can be the referral.
Mm.
Hey, this is Rico. I would think that context would be critical and a critical piece of information, as I feel like that really could influence performance of a range of products. I think one other piece that I don't know, I was off for a little bit, but one other piece that I haven't really ever discussed that I think would be also important to think about is not just NGOs or operational actors as users and reviewers, but also the kind of the end users, the beneficiaries or the vendors, in terms of how they interact with the different products. I think would be an important perspective at some point to consider as well.
Mm.
It's Claire again. I think in most of our contracts we put in that the suppliers are not allowed to reference that they've worked with us. So maybe what we need here is a hybrid model where if it's the product provider who is updating their product onto whatever platform we use, and then for the customers, the users, to, if they want to, be able to add on that they have been a user of that, and then if there's going to be some kind of rating, and then whether they would want to be contacted or not. So maybe that's how it could be managed, with it sort of coming from both sides.
Great feedback and very useful ideas. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll move on to the fourth principle and topic for debate, which gets back to something that Marcella raised earlier and that Michael has raised in a comment in the chat box about the importance of context. And this is, as we know, very important with those open loop eCash technologies. And something we've been struggling with is how these would be presented with the just sheer number of solutions that are out there, because they are necessarily very local solutions that change very quickly. So, one approach that we've been considering would be to include suppliers or products that are available in more than one country, to at least kind of have some sort of limit in making sure that that the products are somewhat established and that we don't have to have every tiny little mobile money startup listed in a catalog like this. But perhaps that this is really something I think there's a lot of room for us to define further and debate the pros and cons and think about other options. So I'll just leave the microphone open for ideas.
This is Marcella. I have more of a question. So is the idea that you think it would be that they are, because there are several reasons why you think it might not be good to have them all listed. Is it because you think that they aren't tried and tested, or because they might just come and go? Because then you can put like a deadline on there that if they don't update their profiles within, let's say, every couple of months or every 3 months, that they just simply get deleted from the database? Or is it because they just haven't been tested and you can't vet them? Just trying to understand better what the reasoning is for not including the numerous local ones. If it's clearly indicated that they are just local and it's very clear, what's the kind of thinking behind that?
I think one of the reasons, Marcel, is that I would fear that it might be hard for us to get all those local providers to enter the information. So that would be hard to present a clear picture at a national level of what products were available. And then it might be slightly more inaccurate, whereas I feel like our combined strength as a community, some of the people on this call could kind of wrangle the e-voucher and the beneficiary information management systems with a pretty good coverage, I think. But perhaps that's not a good reason, or perhaps that's not true. And I think the ideas that you're presenting about putting limitations on, if they're not updated within a certain amount of time, then the profiles expire. Or I think there are potentially ways to manage some of the concerns that initially came to mind.
Sarah, one other thought. This is Hamilton. Would a product that's available, eCash product that's available in multiple countries, include, say, like an EcoBank or an MTN, that's a mobile network operator, a bank that's operational in a variety of countries? They might not have exactly the same platform in each country or capabilities in each country, but they are the same service provider across those borders.
That's kind of what we were thinking, yeah. That those multi-country operators would be able to be included.
All right. And then just on the thinking through the sort of the beneficiary management to eCash, the eVoucher, I think it all starts with that. A lot of times we'll start with that beneficiary management database. That is where data is collected on beneficiaries, and then the distribution piece is either pushed out through a voucher or through eCash. So I think maybe the onus is on the service provider of those beneficiary management systems to say, we have experienced linking to local digital payment channels for eCash solutions in a variety of countries, and can perhaps do that in another country where you're working, so that you're not limiting sort of the eCash product within this catalog.
Yeah, good point, Hamilton.
Yeah, I do not see so well that principle. I do think if you are going to make available for our service provider, it's you are going to reach the local eCash by the self assessment that they will do by themselves to incorporate their product or not. into the catalog, because at the end it's the geographically criteria which is really interested for NGOs. So I think if I really use the catalog because I need a really e-payment solution for South Sudan, if I don't have a good mapping of filtering by South Sudan, good mapping of possible technologies that could work in that context, I think that I could have like incomplete information. I don't know. I'm not so clear about that principle on number 4. It's not that I have a proposal on it, but I'm not so clear of its excluding itself.
Yeah, I hear you. I think maybe this one needs to definitely be rethought. I'm hearing a lot of cons to having this as a principle and maybe a lot of pros to just leaving it more open. So I think that's something we can come back to, and we'll probably end up changing based on what I'm hearing here.
And maybe what we need, sorry, is to be able to say at what level, whether it's global, regional, or like local, single country level, in some kind of filter. So if you're using the catalog, you're able to then be able to see what it is that you're looking for and quickly remove those if you're looking for something regional or global.
Yes.
This is Marcella. I have a point that kind of goes to, I think, all of this in terms of the idea of getting the service providers to be updating and making sure the information is there. And I think it's also important to, if the demand is not driven to the site, to make it useful and worthwhile for the service providers to be posting and updating. I think they may not necessarily feel inclined to do so either. So for example, at NetHope, we have a page on our website, on our solution center for service providers, technology service providers. And at one point, we tried to make a big effort to get those technology service providers for digital payments to post their profiles up there. But then I think it becomes sort of just gets, I don't know if there's no demand coming through to show the value. So there needs to be some kind of linkage to show that by putting their information up there, it is driving demand for their products and services to make it valuable for them to keep updating it as well. So that's just a thought as we go through this too.
Great point, Marcella. And that is one of my primary fears of moving forward with this project is, I think we referenced in the invitation, is this risk just becoming another dusty website that people put a lot of time into. And in part why I think there was interest in this ratings feature, which seemed to have some energy behind it and interest and being a useful tool for those consumers that would drive the demand. Any other reflections on that demand issue that Marcella has raised on how to gauge if this will accomplish that goal?
When this move forward, of course, we need to maybe involve a lot of procurement teams that they might not be so familiar. So when procurement teams start getting familiar with all this new way of like being more active in terms of market assessments, I think that demand could be much more moving forward, more than from a technical team. Yeah.
That's a good point, Jimena. I know that CALP is in the process of designing a cash transfer training that focuses on procurement and logistics teams. So maybe that could be a venue to circulate this forthcoming resource through. And Vincent from CALP has noted on a different theme that as we tend to encourage local market recovery, it would seem reasonable to open the door to local actors. So I think that's another weight on the scale in favor of kind of making that eCash category more open and less restricted, as the principal had initially stated or states now.
Sarah, so one more thing on the demand side. I agree with him, and I think it's you have to be mindful of who the audience for this sort of catalog would be within the organizations that, that you're pushing for. I think procurement's definitely people that are actually going through the process and doing the selection are great, and then also thinking about distribution and how you're going to get it into is it an email sort of listserv that kind of reminds people that there's new or updated information about services in maybe specific regions? Do you do any content, blogs or articles around sort of success stories or use cases to kind of generate ideas and make sure that it's relevant to the people trying to use the site? So I think there's sort of a marketing part of it as well around demand.
Thanks, Hamilton.
Sarah, it's Nick Norman here from Consult Hyperion.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. Sorry, I've been listening to the conversation with great interest. So, as a service provider, I'm used to this model in the private sector. So there's an organization in the US called Gartner that makes an awful lot of money by doing reviews of service provider solutions and printing reports on it. And a lot of business in the US is done by small organizations just going straight to the Gartner report and selecting the top 3 vendors and then sending out RFPs to them. I would look at this as more of a dating site. So I would look at it as a way of people who aren't familiar with the industry coming to you to find out providers, and then they would then contact us, and we would then go through an RFP exercise with them or a vendor selection exercise with them. So the discussion around references I would expect to come out through the RFP exercise. So although it would be nice to have a scoring mechanism, because then we would strive to be the top one, 2, or 3 provider, so that we would be on everybody's shortlist. I think actually having to go and ask for references is something. So I would go. Most of my clients say, yeah, we can't publicize about dealing with them, but when there's a clause in the contract that says without their permission, so you contact the clients and say, please, can I use you as a reference?
That's interesting, Nick. Yeah, I'm putting that in the chat box. That you sent to me, the Gardner business model, something I'm at least not familiar with, but would be interesting to look into. It sounds like that would be maybe a next. It's maybe a next stage.
You don't want to go down that route.
Okay. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, buying from a catalog or buying from a list or generating customers through a list like this is something that is familiar to should be familiar to most service providers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and move on to a few other final questions and considerations. But before I do that, I'm going to jump to tell you what we're thinking in terms of next steps to move forward a little more concretely on this idea. We have proposed, and together with leadership from Amy at Oxfam, the idea of getting a small group of people from the private sector, from the humanitarian world together in a room for at least a day to try to really explore and produce some prototypes or templates on what this catalog could and should look like and should include. So we have tentatively penciled in the date of March 24th in London to do that. And we welcome nominations or suggestions of anyone who's participating today that would like to be part of that, or that have colleagues that might be well positioned to contribute to this effort. So that is kind of what we're thinking in terms of next steps here. But some of the big questions and considerations we still need to figure out in order to make this idea reality include where should this thing be hosted? And who's best positioned to help us create it from a technology standpoint? There's been a little bit of conversation about should we just start with a simple Excel sheet and forget doing some sort of compelling website that has multimedia access, for example? Is it better to just start really, really small? And then we've talked about a lot of considerations and principles today, but what other big issues are we missing that haven't yet been discussed? So I'll just turn the mic over to you guys.
Hi, so this is Marcella, and I guess I have again more questions, but in terms of where to host it and who to create it, it probably also needs to answer the question of, is there funding to support it, and is there long-term funding that could support it, or is there is there just limited funding to maybe get it started and set up, but then you need to find some kind of a service model, like a fee for service model, if you wanted to host it in order to make it sustainable. So perhaps the question about money needs to be part of that discussion as well.
Yeah, Marcel, I think that's a really key question, important question. At the moment, we have some funding to kind of get this off the ground, but we recognize that this is something that would require sustained attention and effort. So that is a question that we need to look at and would be on the agenda for that March meeting, which has been pointed out to me as just before Easter, so that date may need to change.
Would it be feasible transferring for incentive for service providers to be like a registration fee in the future, or I think it not really high, because the idea is not to transfer the cost to and exclude small startups, but at the end, if you have the incentive to participate on this, I think it's good investment. It could be one of the incomes from the for the website or whatever, and also I think that NGOs also could have transfer the cost to NGOs if as long as it's useful. I think that procurement teams are of course are willing to be part of it. Could be.
Hi, it's Claire.
Go ahead, Claire.
I've worked on a few IT products and projects in the last few years, and I know that we've often worked on the functionality of the product first and worried about the support and development later. And actually, sometimes the functionality stuff is the easier part, and who's going to host and how it's going to be sustainable is much more tricky. So I would urge us to be considering that earlier rather than later, because that has been the stumbling block in a number of different IT products.
Point well taken. And Jimena, there was a comment from Beverly at eBerry that as a provider to the sector, they're always open to exploring how they can support education pieces. So I don't think at all that provider supported model is out of the question and something we should probably consider in more detail.
Sorry, I'd had my mic off at that point, which is why I went in the chat box. Yeah, where we're looking across the board, we're always happy to look and see if there's something that we would want to support, whether it was a research piece or whether it was a collaborative working group. So we're always happy for someone to just kind of throw things in the pot to us, and we will look. eBerry also have a foundation, so it's something that we could possibly move into that into that area, and always we could just explore whether it's something that we could support financially. I mean, we're also a fintech company, so we're not just about finance. So even whether it was about the actual catalogue itself and how that could look, again, we're happy to maybe explore all options of how we can support.
Hi, this is Vincent. I think with the cash learning partnership, I think we would have possibly an interest in hosting a catalog if that was also of interest to the partners. But I would say that the features of the catalog would also influence who would want to host. Yeah, and of course the cost of developing it. So it goes both ways. I'm not sure if features or the rest should go first.
Yeah, I have a sense that we'd have to kind of make some assumptions or guesses about how much this would cost as we're deciding where it would be hosted and where that would make most sense. I noticed that we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I just wanted to open the mic and the platform for any final thoughts or considerations, and again invite everyone here if they would be interested in participating in a in-person design session in London in March to please let us know. And I'll put my email in the group chat box to ensure that everybody has access to both my information and the real Lily Fry's contact information. All right. It sounds like that's kind of a wrap for this coffee hour. I really appreciate everybody joining today. We will have a recording of this available, and we are really looking forward to moving this idea forward in 2016. And thanks everyone for your contributions and ideas. It's been really enlightening and helpful as we're trying to think of what would be of most use for the space. So thank you everyone again for joining, and feel free to get in contact if you have follow-up questions or ideas.
Thanks for organizing.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great.
Thanks. We keep in touch.